Should be recording here now. All right, so as just a couple quick housekeeping things, please stay on mute. If you do have any questions, please submit them to the Q&A here. We do have Peter Lindstrom from CERTS and Jack Klimke from the Department of Commerce as well that are going to help field any questions that may come up. We're going to have a three-part webinar here. The first part is going to be really an update on the Solar for Schools program, going over the round one funding updates and any future for the program here. And then the second part is we have specific feedback that we're wanting to solicit from the public, which is due by May 16th. So we're going to go over the different topics and questions that we specifically have. And then the third part, at that point, we're going to go over the step one application and step two part of the application, specific for college and university applicants in mind. So if you're someone that already attended one or more of these webinars and kind of went through those or already had downloaded the last one, it's going to be very similar. So you feel free to jump off. So I'll let you all know when I get to that point, so you don't have to feel bad. As a quick reminder, this is for the Commerce Administered program for the Solar for Schools outside Excel territory. For schools inside Excel territory, they have their other program, which there is a link there. And to get more information and the email, they do have that May plan launch date. Another quick resource here for you, we do have this website that has been put together, which has a ton of information. It's kind of the one-stop shop for the Solar for Schools program. So you can start here and it'll take you right to the About the Grant page, which is going to be the Department of Commerce's page, as information about the grant itself, the grant values, the different timelines, the different updates. That's where this recording and the PowerPoint slide deck will be housed eventually. And then also we have a link here to the technical assistance, which we have contracted through CERTS here. Anyone having questions or concerns or issues is strongly encouraged to reach out to CERTS for help. And then that last piece here is where you can go to apply for a grant when the RFP funding is open, or to log back in if you're going to submit the full application after doing part one. Timeline updates. This was the original timeline that we had in place. So for the round one applicants, it opened on January 5th, and we received applications through January 31st. By the end of February, we notified schools that had applied if they were encouraged to submit full applications. So right here in that big highlighted section is where we are right now. May 31st is when those full applications are due for selected schools. And right now we have a July 1st is the opening of the round two for funding. Right now that is only for colleges and universities. So July 1st through the end of July is when that round one piece is going to open for those folks. So kind of giving an update on that round one funding, this is the list of school districts that were selected to move on to that full grant application. It was a total of 80 individual projects that were approved for funding across 45 school districts. And they were split into cohorts, and cohort 3 was limited to 2 projects per school district, but all 45 school districts that applied from the get-go were given at least one grant. And these 45 districts represent 160,000 schools, or students, I'm sorry, that we're reaching across the state of Minnesota and exposing them to clean energy careers and then renewable energy on site through curriculum. The school funding per statute for the grants was based on financial need. So many of the projects here that were approved to apply for the full grant application were in these higher tier brackets. So this chart is showing the value of the grants, which is that 95% and with a maximum of $114,000. And so the new column in here, if you haven't seen this, is that the distribution one, first of all, and that's showing the distribution of school districts for the entire state of Minnesota across these different values, the ANTC over the APU values. And then on the right side, we have another column which shows what the final distribution was for the grantees that were awarded to move on to full grant applications. So as you can see, there was a heavy weight in those top grant size categories, which means that we're looking at schools that were in the highest financial need category, and they were likely, or most likely, the least likely to look into going solar. So we're really able to reach schools through this process that we likely wouldn't have considered solar for quite a while. So this is a pretty little map showing where those school districts are, except for the very top of the state here. There was a really big distribution of where the grant applicants were coming from, which was super impressive when we mapped that and saw that it popped up. So there are 45 school districts that applied for the grant, and 45 school districts were approved for various level of grants in the application. So again, that was 122 initial applications, which comes down to then the 80 projects that we will fund through the grant process. The grant requests were $11.8 million total if we would have funded all 122 of them. And then 7.5 million is the amount that was awarded for school projects. And again, this funding bucket is just for the K-12 schools. And so this kind of begs the question, where does this leave us in the program, considering the 7.5 million? And so there are various proposals out there for increased funding for the program. So first of all, some level of funding was included in the Waltz Flanagan budget. There is some level of additional funding in both the Senate and the House omnibus bills, and those numbers have been in flux, and nothing has been passed at this point, but the legislative session does end on May 23rd. So we will have more information likely at that time, although that is not guaranteed. So in addition to that, in terms of additional funds, aside from the legislature, there could be funding depending on how many schools from that 80 cohort submit full applications and how much of them get that full grant amount that they are eligible for. So we're anticipating that there will likely be some rollover from the funds, but being that we don't know where the funding is, that's why the July round is open exclusively to colleges and universities. However, that being said, in the statute, we are required to have at least 2 funding rounds per year. So there's nothing stopping us from opening, for example, a September funding round specific to K-12 schools again, if funding were to come through here. So at this point, as I've kind of alluded to, all of the K-12 funding has been preliminarily reserved for those 80 projects. And what we actually did is that it was originally a $7.2 million budget for the grants. And we went back and edited the budget and got it approved up to the 7.5 million so that we could fund those 80 projects across the 45 districts. So currently all those funds are tied up as far as we are aware of, but none of the 80 projects were from college and universities. So while we are looking to get some feedback from colleges and universities on the application process and really looking to push getting some applications in this July round. So part 2 here is our public comment. So we're asking folks to give us emails at solarforschools@state.mn.us due by May 16th. So we have ample time to get any edits to the program made. And the first one here is what should the level of project funding be for state colleges and universities? We had set the level of funding as a flat rate of 40% of the system cost, not to exceed $48,000. And that was set in that round 1 RFP. And so we're looking to see if that should be edited. What folks want to see, if they think it's a decent amount here. We're just looking for public input on that here. And then also I wanted to note, in terms of that grant amount, we set a 10% max per any one college or university, which is going to mean with on the left, 10%, $214,000. Any one college or university could get about 4 grants. So on that note, are we missing some other value that would be necessary to calculate these numbers or taking these into account? So right now for colleges and universities, there's a total available funding of about $2.1 million. But right now we have a little over 1 million that we can administer. And then starting in July of next year, we'll have a little over $1 million to give out in grants. The second topic that we are asking for input on is going to be, what are the priority and/or eligibility criteria that we should utilize? So this is specifically going to be pertaining to if we don't have enough funds for how many grants or grant applications that we receive. We didn't quite anticipate that much attention for the K-12 schools in that first funding round. So it kind of blew us away, and we had to go back during the application process and figure out ways to set priorities. So this is some suggestions in that green box. These aren't set in stone, but the initial funding round did look at it for level of matching funds. So the biggest priority was what level of matching funds, with the schools contributing do they have? And that was supposed to be moving up the priority list, and we had to move on to other things. So some other suggestions are measuring the different thoroughness of the answers, thoroughness and development of the curriculum plan. Should we prioritize a geographic diversity of applicants versus any one university or college that put in multiple applications? And then should we prioritize schools that have a commitment to get multiple bids or do a public RFP process? The world is your oyster. We're looking to get input here. The third one here is what technical assistance offerings are missing. So we realize again that there weren't any applications from colleges or universities in the first round. So is there something that we're missing, some assistance that we're missing? Right now, I have the list of these kind of determined technical assistance options that CERTS is offering. However, this is not all encompassing. So if there is something else that you all are looking for or needing assistance with, what would that look like? And what can we do to make that happen? And then the final piece does speak beyond just the colleges and universities. We're looking for the entire process as a whole. So how else could the RFP or application process be strengthened? Different data collection, different limits to districts or colleges, the overall timeline, location eligibility. Should we allow, for example, we allowed multiple grants per school building if it was a small district and they had an elementary and a high school housed on 2 separate meters. What would that look like for colleges and universities? And should we continue to offer that for K-12 schools? And then additional curriculum component suggestions are always helpful and suggested. And I will circle back to these at the end of the presentation. But that is kind of it for parts 1 and 2. So now I do want to go to through the full kind of application process for anyone that hasn't been familiar with what we require in step 1 and in step 2. And then we will have an opportunity for the questions at the end of this part here. And then we will also go over those different public responses that we're requesting from folks. So here's your opportunity to drop off if you got the interesting tidbits you were looking for. So this is a new timeline here on this slide. It's starting with that May 16th public comment due date. July 1st, we are going to be opening round 2 up to colleges and universities only. And July 31st, the step 1 round 2 applications are due, and that's again the readiness assessments. By the end of the following month, we are hoping to notify the colleges and universities that applied what their status is. And again, at this point is when the funds are preliminarily reserved. So if you've been told that you are deemed ready to move on to the full application, you can guarantee the funds are yours unless you do not submit a full application or if you submit an incomplete application. And then November 30th is the deadline for that full applications to be submitted by colleges and universities. The very first pre-step to getting a Solar for Schools grant from us is going to be requesting that project ID. And we do want those to come through the Solar for Schools email address. And we do want you to provide a main school person's contact name, title, and email, along with the installation site, and then the college or university name as well. Please include the project ID once we give it to you on all email correspondences and submissions. It's going to really help us expedite the process and keep everything in order and prevent any delays and things. It's how everything is organized. So once you have that project ID, you can submit a step 1 application once it's open, July 1st. The pre-step here, again, technical assistance available anytime during, before, after the application process, step 1 or step 2. I do have Peter's contact info if anybody has not been in touch with CERTS. If you can't, or if you haven't noticed, I am strongly suggesting schools reach out to CERTS. It's a completely free service that we're super happy to have partnered with on. So the step 1, notice of intent, school readiness assessment. I'm going to go over the different pieces that we are at this time requiring. It's very similar to what we did for K-12 schools. So we want general contact information, and we do want this application to be filled out under an account from the college or university. And then once you have that account set up, you are free to add collaborators if you do want somebody else to help you fill out and submit the application. The assessment must be completed online. There is not a written version of the program. And then again, once you're deemed ready, you get to move on to the full application. The only other thing that I want to highlight here is this authority to apply letter. We are asking that we get a letter, a PDF copy of a letter signed by an authorized school representative saying that they are in support of this school or this site going solar. Curriculum development plan. There were some questions about this the first round. It does not have to be a completely developed or integrated curriculum at this point. So there's multiple different steps to this process. There's the step 1 applications, there's the step 2, and then we have up to a year-long commitment during the installation process, and then there's a year follow-up as well. So throughout that entire process, we're asking to see different updates and development happening with your curriculum and seeing how it's going. So at this stage, while we encourage you to be as thorough and developed as possible, we're just looking for a plan at this phase. And then the only other thing that I want to highlight on this slide for energy use is going to be, please make sure to highlight the required materials when you're uploading your copy of your electric bill, for example. Highlight the site that it's referenced to in the meter number if there are multiple different meters within the same building, for example. And also be sure that when you're providing us the 2 years of energy use, that it has the kilowatt hours on there, the total annual kilowatt hours. I don't need to know the total cost to the school, just the amount of energy that was used. So system description, and this is a lot of this stuff CERTS can also help you with if you do want some of that assistance from CERTS. So you want to make sure that you're using the solar suitability app to have a preliminary site assessment that's taking into account that shade profile for your system. A lot of this can be easily done online, and we're wanting to make sure and check off that you all have looked into some potential issues that may impact your system. And then for the procurement process, describe your prevailing wage compliance and experience and what your school's typical procurement process and timeline would look like for this system. And we do understand that a lot of this, well, I guess not the procurement process, but the system description might change. So again, you're not committed to any one installer at this point. You haven't gone out to bid or even necessarily got bids, but where are you at? What have you looked into? What research have you done? So the system funding here. So we're looking for in the financing, what have you looked into? Are you looking into how you're going to pay for the remaining part of the system? Are you completely certain that you have that? Is there other fundraising that's been done? Where are you at with that? And what type of ownership are you thinking of, if anything, at this point? Let's see. The other big thing that came up with this component is going to be that utility and interconnection piece. So there has been some instances of issues with timeline getting interconnected, and we do have that 12-month turnaround for once you enter into a contract with the state. So we do want to make sure that you've been in contact with your electric utility representative. We want to know that they're in support of the system and willing and telling you that they will interconnect the system. And then what does their timeline typically look like? What is their process and fees and everything? A letter of support is always optional or encouraged, but it's not necessary. Just provide in typed out form what kind of contact and information you have learned from the electric utility representative. So that's the step 1 of the application. And again, we'll have a 1-month turnaround before we let you know if you're eligible to submit that full grant application. And then once you're deemed ready, you have several months, until the end of November, to submit the full grant application. And the big point here is that this one must be submitted by the developer or utility on your behalf. So the first part at least has to be set up under account for the school, but this one has to be the developer or utility. So if you have any issues in adding someone as a collaborator, feel free to reach out to that Solar for Schools email, and we can help you get set up to add somebody into that account. You can set it up so that they have permissions to edit the application or to submit the application or to submit the application. And just like the step 1, this one must be completed online as well. Okay, so for the full project information, this is going to be, once you've already selected a developer, you know what the final system is going to look like. So where you were maybe hypothesizing before and using those online apps to determine different information, this is looking for that final information. And the developer is going to have all this information. Let's see. The only thing to add in here is that for the proposed contract agreement between the school and the developer, we are requiring some information to be included in there in terms of addressing operating and maintenance of it, a fair market value, if applicable, with a third party ownership type system or PPA, and then the full life cycle costs of the system, taking into account any removal and disposal costs. So those do have a full, more detailed explanation in the full application, and that will be included in the RFP details as well. As promised, we asked plenty of times for curriculum updates, and the biggest thing is that we want to see progress on this development with different teachers involved, or if the developer is involved, students' involvement, feedback, edits. The world is your oyster, but to show that there has been progress made on integrating that into the curriculum. And then for the financial need, this is going to be the full detailed final project budget, prevailing wage insurance. So the prevailing wage assurance piece of this is going to be taking into account what the school put in step 1 with what experience and commitment the developer has or the utility in step 2. How are those are going to integrate and work together? For the developer's plan to reduce capital expenses, what we mean by this is an example for, as your developer, how are you going to reduce the initial expense to purchase and install the system? Are you going to help maximize the applicant's lifetime savings from the system, or reduce it some other way? It's a pretty open-ended question, but we do encourage, cash flow, lifetime savings, or other financial metrics to be included in that question answer. So that's all the required information for step 2. I did want to touch on 2 other things with the grant. The queue and priority list. So these little bullets here, the financial readiness, the agreement to get multiple bids, detailed and thorough answer, those are not set in stone right now. We're looking to add other priority metrics into the application. What should we look for if we have to select one school application over another? We clearly received a great number of applications in round 1, and we want to be more prepared for this round 2. Because once you get through the step 1 process, your grant is reserved and it's yours as long as you meet the other requirements moving forward. For the installation milestones, there's going to be 3 key deadlines here: a month 4, a month 8, and a final 12-month check. So it means that these things must be done by the 4, 8, and 12 months. They could be done within 1 week if you want, and there will be check-in forms and different requirements that we have detailed for each of those, providing proof of completion of each of the requirements. And then with that, I think we can start to open it up to some questions here. I just wanted to leave this up here for the questions that we are broadly putting out and wanting feedback on. So, again, there's the Q&A box. Jack, do you see anything that's come through? I don't have access to that screen right now.
Yeah, we did have one question for public schools. Given procurement statutes, must they obtain 2 proposals and go with the low bid to partner with? Response is, you follow whatever procurement requirements your school has for any other project. We do recommend getting multiple bids and encourage you to reach out to CERTS with any questions as to what to look for in the bids, how to address questions that you might have to your developer. They can help you with all of those.
All right, last call. Any other questions here? If not, you're free to email anything to that Solar for Schools email. Emily respond that way, and I will be emailing out these questions as well, trying to solicit some feedback. We'd love to get more public input on these things before we get those final documents put out. I think I saw someone asking for CERTS contacts. Oh. Yes, someone asked for that. I did see that pop through.
Okay, Mandy, I don't know that I can read the chats, just the Q&A.
Oh,
so double check the chat box for me.
Yep, that's what I did see. Can you clarify the 10%, 214,000? Yes. Okay, so the question is, can you clarify the 10% max per college university, which is equal to 214,000, and the 40%, 48,000 max noted? Yep, let me go back to that slide here. I think it's this direction. Did I go too far? This is the one I want. So for any college or university grant application that comes in, it's going to be for a max of a 40 kW system. And the grant will automatically, right now, is determined to be 40% of the full, the cost to purchase and install the system, with a maximum value of that $48,000. So if you decide to go with a company that's going to charge you $400,000 to install the system, that's your prerogative, but your grant is going to max out at the $48,000. The grant itself is really set to more the percentage with just that maximum value. For the limit for any one college university, that's that 10%, which is going to be about, it looks like 4 grants if you divide out $48,000. So this could be, oh my goodness, I don't know that, Minnesota colleges and universities. So if there's a technical college that has 2 different buildings or 2 different like city locations, but they're a part of one technical college, then they could apply for up to 4 grants and potentially get up to 4 grants. And so it could be potentially even within one building. If you're one building technical college campus in one city, but you can make a case for, you have 2 different electric meters, which like charge 2 different things, and they're 2 separate like schools or departments that would each be associated with education only, you are eligible for multiple grants. I can mumble through that a little bit. These buildings, the buildings that are eligible are only going to be ones that are for the education portion of things. So administrative buildings are not eligible at this time. We're looking for the ones that are going to be closest to where the students are, where you're integrating the curriculum into.
A good way to think of that is if you have like a school of dentistry and a school of electronics, those are separate schools. If they are metered separate and have basically a separate structure, we view that as being a school.
Oh, that is a blurry picture. I'm just going to try to read that. And if you have a specific question about a specific location, feel free to reach out via email. I don't have anything else in the chat. Jack, anything else in the Q&A?
No.
All right, cool. Well, thank you all for your time. We will get this recorded and posted online along with the PowerPoint slides. If anything else comes up, please reach out to us via email, and we look forward to getting lots of applications from you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.